So good day everyone, we are your reporter and we are tasked to discuss about flow charting. So this is a very good topic because it gives us idea on how specific processes are made on a certain or specific topic. So by having this, we can be able to picture out or we can imagine the possible happenings that may be in a business matter or something that is in relation of professionals, maybe the information system given are focused on accounting, the productions, or human resources, and etc. The happening within those certain processes to be able to meet their goals. So we have now the objectives. So flow charting has a lot of topics to be discussed. As we go on this reporting, later on you will know the purpose of the flow charts, the types, those symbols that are being used to create flow charts, because every symbols has its own meaning and usage. So the steps taken to create flow charts and a lot more. So presented on your screen are the following objectives of flow charting. Next, we have the flowchart types and conventions. Flowcharts are often classified by their overall purpose and function. So basically, a flowchart is a graphical representation of some part of an information system. So it shows us steps in sequential order and wisely used in presenting the flow of how things work and how these information systems affect the decision control of the management. So there are 4 types of flowcharts, and each type has its own purpose and functions. So first, the system flowcharts. So give the user a big picture look at an information system. So these are the way of displaying how data flows in a system and how decisions are made to control events. Second one, we have the program flowcharts. Show the logic associated with a computer. So it uses a set of standard graphic symbols to represent the sequence of coded instructions fed into a computer. Next, we have the document flowcharts. It shows the various documents involved in a system. So this is more specific because it illustrates the flow of documents and information among areas of responsibilities within an organization. So it portrays the procedure performed on those documents. And the last one, we have the hardware flowcharts. So they show the computer, printers, monitors, input devices, and other hardware elements associated with an information system. So those are the 4 types of flowcharts. Next, we have now the common conventions or habit associated with good flowcharting. So now these are the things to remember when you are making a flowchart, because it will make your flowchart more easily and understood and be more useful. Number 1, the flowchart should generally be read from top to bottom and left to right. So basically, it needs to be properly arranged, and so that it can be users can be able to understood your flowcharts. Next one, we have flowcharts should have plenty of white spaces. Why? Because if it's too crowded, there is a tendency that the users will have a hard time to understand what the flowchart is trying to imply. So it needs to be broken up into more than 1 pages for easier readings. Third, flowcharts should have a title. Of course, it needs to have a title to avoid confusion. So flowcharts have a bunch of symbols on a page. So it is a good idea if you put a title of your flowcharts based on what it represents. Fourth, flowcharts should be organized in columns that depicts areas of responsibilities. The fifth one, we have documents involved in a business process should have a clear origin and clear termination. So it should be properly stated in your flowchart the complete information needed. So from the start of the process up to the end, it should be clearly posted in your flowchart to avoid confusion and to be properly understood by the users. The last one, we have the rough drafts of flowcharts should be discussed by people involved in the process. So those are the 6 conventions common conventions associated with good flow charting. So adhering to those 6 conventions will make your flow charts a lot easier to read, to understand, and be considered useful. So that's all about the flow chart types and conventions.
The next topic is flow charting tools and symbols. When we say flow chart, it is a type of diagram that represents a workflow or process using connecting lines and a set of conventional symbols. When we say conventional symbols, it's a symbol that is widely accepted interpretation. Flow chart can be designed using a variety of tools, both high-tech and low-tech. Low-tech end can be draw a flow chart with a paper and pencil, and also can be used flowcharting templates which include many common flowcharting symbols. While in manual method it's useful for quick and dirty starts, at a flowchart they can become stages and messy over time. There are numerous software programs facilitate the preparation of good flowcharts. These two useful programs are Microsoft Visio and SmartDraw. First is Visio. It is under the Microsoft Office and it interfaces fairly well with other programs such as Word and PowerPoint and Excel. Second is SmartDraw. It is an independent software program and is good when designing all kinds of flowcharts. Both programs designs specifically designed for flowcharting, but most people prefer to use Microsoft Visio because it's easy to use, has a great features, functionality, and also has a cheaper price than SmartDraw. In most of the Microsoft Office, you will find the flowcharting symbols under the Shapes command of the Insert tab. Next slide, please. Because the flowcharts represent a kind of universal language in information system design, implementation, and evaluation. According to ANSI, or American National Standard Institute, flowchart symbols can be divided into 4 groups: data, process, line, and special. Next slide. So there are 12 different flowcharting symbols. Actually, there are 28 or more flowchart symbols, but only 12 of them I will be discussing to you. The first symbol is a notation. It is an open rectangle with a dash or solid connecting it to the corresponding symbol in the flowchart. It is used to add descriptive comments or explanation to a flowchart. So if you want to add additional information about a step in a program, you can use the annotation symbol. The next symbol is decision. It is a diamond shape in the flowchart that contains a decision to be made. It selects one of the several paths based on the conditional statement. For example, does the computer turn on? So each box either yes or no or both, near them to indicate the direction the user should follow on the flowchart. The next symbol is document. It is a rectangle with a wave-like base. This shape is used to represent the input and output of document. Example of input are receiving a report, email, or order. Example of an output using a document symbol include generating a presentation, memo, or letter. The next symbol is database. It's a data represented by a cylinder in the flowchart that is used when data are stored, retrieved electronically. Database symbols show when the output of a task is stored into a database. It's good a practice to write the name of the database inside the symbol. The next symbol is file. It is inverted triangular shape in the flowchart and sometimes referred to as merge, used to indicate how the documents are filed. Examples include by name or by date. The next symbol is generic process. It has a rectangular shape in the flowchart that is used for any process in flowchart. This is the most common symbol in both process flowchart and process maps. Example for this is preparing purchase order. Next, please. The next symbol is manual process, represented by a trapezoid with the longest parallel side at the top. The manual process is any operation that is performed manually by a person. So it is an operations does not involve IT or information technology. The next symbol is visual display. It is a data that is displayed or people to read, such as data on the monitor, projector, PC user, or machine operator. The next symbol is on and off page connectors. On page represented by a small circle, it is used to avoid cross lines on the page, while off page represented as a home plate shaped pentagon. It is used to avoid overcrowding and move action of flow chart between pages. of page is helpful when you have several complex connection processes, for example, process that runs through several operational departments like purchase of payment. The next symbol is predefined process, represented as a rectangle with double-struck vertical edges, used to encapsulate a named process with multiple steps. It indicates a sequence of action that perform a specific task embedded with a larger process. This sequence of action could be described in more detail on separate flowchart. The next symbol is terminator, as a stadium oval or rounded rectangle. It indicates the beginning or end of a program flow in your diagram. Lastly, is used to connect the symbol in flowchart and indicate the direction of the flow. The next topic will be discussed by Monica Barrera about the flowchart design steps.
The next topic is the flowchart design steps. So everyone has different way on how they design a flowchart, and there is no right way to do it as long as you achieve the goals and purpose of it. However, in the book, there are 7-step process on how we design a flowchart. So first step is establish the system boundary. System boundary means a conceptual line that divides the system that you want to study from everything else. It is the critical process in designing a flowchart because if you don't establish well the system boundary, it is hard for you to create a adequate, effective, or a good flowchart. So also it helps you to identify the external and internal information. Either it is for the boundary between customer departments, sales departments, cash receipt departments, and etc. So the second steps of making a flowchart is determine column headings. So we should determine the column headings. Either it is a cash receipt department, or a payroll check, a customers department, and the sales department. So this area usually includes the department names, functions, or the position titles. The third step is list action performed within each column. In this step, we should list or create a possible action of what should be the flow of every department. So for example, in the customer section or the customer department, the action for this department are receiving a confirmation email, creates the order of the customers, and etc. In sales department, of course, we check the inventory database, collect payments, and send verification, and etc. So after we list the action performed, the next step is to select what appropriate symbols that will best represent them, because every symbols have different representation. For example, the terminator, or the oval shape symbol, it represent start or end. So there are 12 symbols, and every symbols have different meanings and different representations. So once you've done in selecting shape or symbol and correlated action, it is the time that we draw the draft of flowchart. We should imagine what flowchart design we will creating. So after that, the sixth step is to discuss the flowchart with others. So after the drafting, we should get feedback to other people in order for us to determine what might be the things that we intended to change, and also help us to generate good flowchart. So lastly, if revise as needed, the last step, if there changes added in the flowchart, of course, we should revise it until we get the best output or design of our flowchart. So that's all for the flowchart design step.
Good day, I'm your next reporter, and our topic is all about flowcharting in accounting information systems, which will be the connection of flowcharts or the use and role of flowcharts in accounting information system. Next. As explained by my co-reporters, flowcharting is not only intended for schooling, yet accounting information system professionals also apply this in their line of work. Enumerated in your screens are examples of the uses of flowcharts in accounting information system professionals. Confirming how a system is currently operating, suggesting improvements to an accounting information system, evaluating internal control deficiencies, and designing procedure manuals are the different ways of using flowcharts, mainly in finding problems and for layouting solutions. Next. Accounting information system professionals often use the question, how things work, which is an important matter, especially if you are a new employee in a certain company. As a newbie, you need to confirm how a system is operating before starting to make an audit or make recommendations in operational efficiency. Flowcharts make it easier to view the whole system of the company, and as a new employee, you need to look over for any existing manuals and may talk to with the other employees familiar with the system. After looking for the existing systems, you can now try designing your own flowchart for a business model process. Then try discussing your own design with the other teams, or you may ask any suggestions from them or clarifications if that's the way things really work in the company, so that they can also guide you and correct for misunderstandings. Next is the overall goal of the flowchart, which is obviously to understand the current state of the things, the way they are, and not the way they should be. This means that the facts, knowing what people are really saying and doing, knowing what the current situation is set up for, and knowing what is it really you're facing, rather than knowing the way things should be, like asking yourself what's the right thing or how things should be in this case. Next, analyzing flowcharts is an important element because it's the way you understand and study the past flowcharts and connecting it to the present situation. Examining previous flowcharts is an opportunity for you to spot improvements from the differences from the present up to the current state. The training, experience, and your sense of business will surely be a great help to point out and describe possible improvements. Interviewing employees and doing some research will add and increase your knowledge in order to create a better flowchart. The participation of employees are also important because their ideas, suggestions, and recommendations will be your keys in opening the doors for new opportunities and improvements. Some of these improvements include redesigning forms, increasing or decreasing the number of copies of a particular form, obtaining authorizing signatures for transactions, filing in a different way, and or changing form from paper-based to electronic or vice versa. Next, another feature of having or using flowchart is that it can spot internal control deficiencies in accounting information system. It can also enhance risk analysis by providing a concrete picture of the whole system and its process. In spotting its internal control deficiencies, you can start by making a list of the system's risk exposures and its factors. Then look and connect the risk with the flowchart that you made. Lastly, flowcharts can be the starting point for the development of procedure manuals, which are basically an instruction book that explains how an everyday task is carried out in an organization. Next, finally, a quote from Herbert states that every staff member document his or her duties and write a procedure manual. A time-consuming effort, but worth doing. Which is really true in every organization. It may seem unimportant, but every employee is necessary and every effort is not wasted. Thank you.
Critical thinking. So in this part of the report, I will explain to you how to create or develop a flowchart based on the author's experience. So remember that it is not the only right way to develop a flowchart. The example uses the flip side of Barnes and Noble's book selling, collection, and sales process, which is the acquisition and payment process, which covers the recognizing the need for new inventory to the payment of the vendor. I will only include the first 5 part because the last 2 step is self-explanatory. So the first step is establishing system boundaries. In this example, we will only use 3 system boundaries for the purchasing department, receiving department, and the vendor. Then the second step is to determine column headings. Since we have 3 system boundaries, therefore we will create 3 column headings for the purchasing department, which will be responsible for handling out the purchase order. Then for the receiving department, they are responsible for receiving the shipped books. Then for the vendor, they are the publishers where Barnes and Nobles will buy books from. And the third is listing of action performed within each column. So the first column, which is the purchasing department, they will first issue purchase order, then file their original for their own records, then send copies to the receiving department and the accounting department. And for the receiving department, they will first receive the books from the vendor, then create a receiving report and send copies of the receiving report to the purchasing department and the accounting department. Then, for the vendor, they will only ship the books and issue the invoice. So, after accomplishing the 4th step, we can now create or prepare our first draft. So, next slide, please. So, as you can see in this slide, this is an example of a flowchart for the acquisition and payment process of Barnes and Noble's online book selling. So as you can see, they use the terminator symbol to indicate the start and the end of the flowchart, and it is divided into 3 parts or 3 system boundaries for the purchasing department, the vendor, and the receiving department. And they use the predefined process symbol in the issuance of purchase order and the receipt of books, because this part will have multiple steps like sending out multiple requests for quotation, creating purchase order, negotiating contract and sending purchase order, receiving goods and checking invoice, and etc. Then they use the document symbols for purchase order, invoice, and the receiving report because this part will have documents. And as you can see, the purchase order and the receiving report are layered because it will have multiple copies of the documents for the original and 1 or more copies. Then we can also use the annotation for adding of comment and explanation on the part of the action. Then the documents in purchase order and receiving report will be now inputted into the purchase order database and receiving report database so that it will be stored electronically. So they also use the on and off page connector to avoid the overcrowding and cross line in the flow chart. The on and off page connector is represented with letters A and B. So next, reporter.
Summary. Number 1. List and discuss the purpose and use of system flowchart, document flowchart, program flowchart, and hardware flowchart. We discussed there about the different type of flowchart, how it is useful, and it showed the big picture of what is happening and show how documents, paper, and electronic flow through information system, while program flowchart details the step in a specific computer program. A hardware flowchart lay out the computer, printer, monitor, and other hardware device used in information system. Number 2. Explain the basic part of and design consideration common to all type of flowchart. In general, a flowchart should be read from top to bottom and left to right. Flowcharts are communication tools. They should be easy to read. Every flowchart should have title to make easier for reference after its creation. Flowchart also should be recognized into column based on area of responsibility. In information system, documents should have clear beginning and ending point as well. Number 3. Identify and describe the common symbol and information technology used in flowcharting. It is shown in figure 6.1, the flowcharting symbol. Individual research, reflection, and self-assessment 6.3. Reveal more. 2 popular IT tools for flowcharting creation are SmartDraw and Visual. Number 4. Discuss way flowchart impact the design, implementation, evaluation of accounting information system. Flowchart can give a new accountant or consultant a quick overview of how a system works. Flowchart also be used as part of auditing process and or to suggest process improvement in the accounting system, particularly when combined with the risk. They also can inform recommendation regarding internal control. Number 5. Create and interpret system flowchart. We have 3 key ideas are important in creating flowchart. First, to achieve clear representation of a system, not a deterministic response to a particular problem or case situation. Second, practice well, increase your skill in flowcharting. Number 3, seldom will your first creation will be your final one. Consultation with other professionals. Flowcharting is one of the common use and documentation technique for accounting information system. For accounting students like us, who typically like dealing with numbers better than words and symbols, they can be challenging, but with the time, practice, and patience, we learn the art of developing clear, meaningful flowchart and use them as analytical tools in accounting information system. And that's all. Thank you for listening and watching.